I listen to your tapes and I write down little posties, and this is kind of a accumulation. Beliefs in the Bible. With Jesus' bloodline, I'm wondering if you think that, the way it's portrayed in the Bible is accurate.
We actually have not read it. Not that it isn't a good book, but there are many good historical books written from the perspective of many different people.
Well, I'm curious. It goes, genealogy of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham, born of da-da-da-da-da, yada, 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 and to Jacob, who was born Joseph, the husband of Mary. So it's almost important to me that Joseph really was his biological
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? We understand the reason that different historical figures are meaningful in your now experience because they were catalysts of expansion. Every now and again, someone comes forth and the clarity of their connection from source energy is extraordinary, and there's a sort of renaissance of thought, a sort of quantum leaping of thinking. But the thing that we want you to hear from us, because this is the most significant thing that we could ever give you about one called Jesus, or one called Buddha, or one called Muhammad, or one called... There are so many that are used as symbolic masters to humans in later generations. The thing that we most want you to hear is that it is not the biological blood lineage that is important. It is the spiritual lineage that is important. In other words, the stream of source does not follow any bloodline. It follows energy paths.
But, to make you a Kennedy, to be a Kennedy bloodline, you need a Kennedy father.
Well, why is that significant? Why would it be significant to be a Kennedy? Or to be...
Well, the son of God. The whole Jewish Bible is based upon that genealogy. That source energy is being passed down through generation to generation with a blessing, or... You know what I mean?
Well, the source energy is passed on to everyone. Always. No exceptions.
So I should get over the virgin birth and Joseph? You know what I mean? Should I just let that go? Like, it's not possible Joseph and Mary had sex and Jesus was born. That really is important to me, because I can't believe...
We have not come here with any intention of disturbing comfortable beliefs that are working for you. What we are suggesting to you is that always in an attempt here and now to express into a physical format that which we know from our non-physical format, there has to be some basis of understanding from which you ask and some basis of understanding from which you receive. And it is not an easy thing to purely translate non-physical into physical. In other words, one of the strongest basis of that which we offer is we cannot answer a question that you have not asked. So when you activate a question, we must give you the response from our point of knowing. And through time, as man has attempted to place himself in the greater scheme of things, often extraordinary distortion comes forth. In trying to understand this, then this must be so, and in trying to understand this, then this must be so. And we are not very good perpetuators of distortion in order to maintain beliefs that don't really matter all that much anyway. When you step back from the details of this story, and granted, it's an important story, you step back from the details of this story, and you think about life on planet Earth. Now that's a story. That's a story that you can get your teeth into. In other words, there's evidence of life on planet Earth. You see your Earth spinning in its orbit. You're beginning to understand your weather patterns. You're beginning to understand your history. You have evidence of man on this Earth generations. You see the births of animals and people and trees. You get a sense of the way things are working. And we say, very long time planning, very long time orchestration, very long time creation in place before man even got here. And an established physical experience through which non-physical energy pours forth. And all of it is godly, and all of it is spiritual. In other words, there is nothing in all of the universe more spiritual than the union of male and female and the conception of a new fetus into which more God force and source energy comes forth. In other words, there is nothing more significant than that. It is the perpetuation of your species. It is the perpetuation of life on planet Earth. And the coming forth of the spirit into those cells, into those energies, into that consciousness. In other words, this is God force. This is creation. This is extraordinary. This is the plan. This is the way that it is. And how man ever gets to this place where he needs the Son of God to come forth into this godly extension in a way that is other than all that is creation has already for eons established in order to be the preface and the basis for that. How man comes to the place where he needs to say, oh, well, yes, that's the way it has been for everything except just this one. This one is the exception to that. And we say, why does there need to be an exception to the sacred and magnificent creation of this universe, you see? There is something lost in the translation. That very one begged, please do not set me up as something that is different from that which you are. Please let me be the example of all that you are.
Does death really matter? Because it happens in so many different ways. I mean, is life really...
From our perspective, there is no death, because you never cease to exist and you never cease to hold consciousness and you never for a moment cease knowing who you are. And so the death experience is more a change of focus than anything else.
Excuse me. Because I think, like, if I'm driving my car on a dark night, rainy night, and I come up and someone's in the road and I hit them and I kill them, you know, I kind of feel like I can live with that death because it, you know, it's still a death. It's important in someone's life. But, you know, I didn't mean to do it. It was dark. I didn't see him, and, you know, I hit him. So in my mind, I can say, well, I didn't mean it. And you can kind of move on from it, as opposed to maybe shooting him or, you know, beating him up.
Well, you get into a lot of trouble as humans as you try to, from the outside in, decide which acts are good and which acts are gooder and which acts are bad and which acts are badder. In other words, it's an interesting thing. Every now and again, Esther will feel upheaval within herself as she sees someone who has murdered someone having a 25-year sentence and someone who has used a drug being in jail for life. And she will say, there is something really screwy about the arbitrary way that we are passing judgment. And humans have had a hard time deciding what they think God thinks. Humans have had a hard time for a long time figuring out or coming into any agreement about what they think that broader perspective thinks about all of that. But we can tell you what we know to be, and that is that there is not death, and that anything that you are living has come to you in response to your vibrational offering. So here's the easy way for you to hear this. When Jerry first began visiting with us, he was not so different from you. He had a lot of questions that he'd been carrying around for a long time that he was wanting to sort out. And we were not as easy on him as we've been on you here today, in that the majority of the answers that we gave him in those early days were, this is not your work. This is not your work. Well, this is not your work. Well, this is not your work. And finally, after he'd endured that answer for a few thousand times, he exclaimed, what is my work? And we said, we thought you'd never ask. he had an idea that justice would be better served if there were islands of punishment where all of the rapers went to one island and did it to each other, and all of the murderers went to an island and did it to each other, and all of the burglars went to an island and burgled each other. He thought that that would be justice. And we said to him, you already have these islands. They are vibrational islands. And as we explained it to him and the small group that had gathered to discuss the topic, many were unhappy with our answer. They said, Abraham, how is it that the person who is murdered ends up on the same island with the person who murders? And we say, because they are coming into harmony with the vibration. When you look at something you do not want and you shout, no, no, I want not that, and you think about it and you feel fear around it until you have actually activated in your vibration, you are the candidate for the murder. In other words, the one who fears something the most is the one who has it most activated in their vibration. And it is logical that they would experience it. And without knowing it, they have been defying their guidance system. Their guidance system has been saying, this stove is hot. And they've been saying, well, I know the stove is hot and I know that this is painful, and I've been feeling this emotion called worry or fear or hatred or anger, and it never felt good while I was feeling it. But just the same, I've learned that these thoughts are good thoughts as I read the books that say, think these thoughts and disregard the way you feel. And so I'm just going to leave my hand on the stove and just see what happens. And what I would really ask is that all of the physics of this time-space reality and all of the laws of the universe yield and let me be the one exception, that I can put my hand on a hot stove and it will not burn my hand. And in time, they conclude that that did not work out very well. If the stove is hot and they put their hand on the stove and they do not pay attention to their guidance system, then eventually they receive the detrimental effect of having their hand on a hot stove. And that's exactly what happens to someone who is murdered or someone who dies in a traffic accident. Eventually, they experience the effect of having not listened to their guidance system. Now, it's not fair for us to imply that everyone who dies has not listened to their guidance system, because in some ways we're falling into the same incorrect thought that man has, that death is a bad thing. You have put death and death penalty in the same sentence for so long that you conclude that death is a bad thing, when death is just like walking out of this room into another. Death is the next logical step. It is the changing of consciousness. It is the regaining of the full awareness, you see. But we have to say to you that if you run over someone in your car, that you have created it. You have co-created it with the one who got run over. Now, the further implication of your question is there some sort of judgment about it? In other words, how bad was that really? And what we're wanting you to understand, it was a co-creative moment. And in the greater scheme of things, it was not different than any other co-creative moment. But from your physical standpoint, you want to decide, well, which things are the baddest? And we want you to understand that you are creators, and from our perspective, always doing the best that you know to do in any moment. And the death experience is always suicide, always, every time, because every death experience is created by self. No matter how it plays out, every single one of them is created by self. And so
there's really no wrong path.
You can't get it wrong because you never get it done. And no matter what you have lived, you now have the perspective from which you stand. And this powerful perspective with this desire that's been stirred by what you've been living has huge calling of source energy qualities. And so as you stand in this newly discovered asking with energy pouring through you in a more powerful way than ever before, and you have practiced in easier times relaxing and allow the energy to flow, things always work out for you. And sometimes the way they work out for you is in the death experience. In other words, sometimes people get so resistant about allowing well-being to flow that the death experience is the way that they release all of the resistance. And that happens every time. In the death experience, there is the releasing of all resistance. But it is so lovely when you are physically focused and you are able to, in your physical body, release resistance and allow that source energy here in this time-space reality. Some will have to croak to taste the sweetness of it. But what we are teaching, art of allowing, is tasting the sweetness of it before you croak.